Good morning. Today is August the 15th, Monday. And if you are listening to this episode, we are currently in VBS. And so throw up a prayer right quick. Yo, yo. We are currently
Yeah.
we are currently in our VBS for this summer for CGS. And so if you could pray for us I guess before this episode or after this episode, that'd be greatly appreciated. Today we are talking about covenantal friendship. What does that even mean? And we'll be talking about another um, interesting post that we saw from Big Eva in the past couple of weeks. All of that and more. Just that to this morning on the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
My name is Brian Lee, Sam's best friend.
No, we are acquaintances at best, classmates. And we have with us Pastor Eugene this morning. VBS just started. Today, we are talking about biblical friendship. And I know that we actually had an episode already on biblical friendship, and that was episode 82
Wow.
to be exact. But this episode is kind of like a Q&A episode for one of your sermons, Pastor Eugene. I think it was 4 weeks ago. And that was the sermon on 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 1 to 42. Quite the long pericope. But there were some questions that came in, and so I wanted to discuss biblical friendship, especially the covenantal aspect of biblical friendship.
Yeah,
Is that cool?
sure.
So I wanted to just quickly recap the passage of 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 1 to 42. This is like a 3-sentence recap of 42 verses, though. So if you would like to, highly recommend to pause this time and read the 43 verses. Let's pause now. Then Brian, you can put some elevator music in here. Welcome back. So just to quickly recap, Saul, the king of Israel, had been after David's life. So David comes to Jonathan and calls upon the covenant that they have made with one another for Jonathan to help him escape from the grips of King Saul. Pastor Eugene, you also talked about how covenant means that you are dependable, faithful, and you are selfless. But I'm just kind of wondering, in verse 20 of this text, we find out that Jonathan and David had covenanted with one another. And like you mentioned in your sermon, a lot of times people will take that to mean that they were gay, which you argued against, and rightly so. So I'm just wondering, is this some kind of deeper level of friendship? What does it mean that they covenanted with one another in friendship? Because I don't think that's the first thing that we think of when we become friends with somebody. You go to the gym with them, you grab coffee with them, you start hanging out more and more, and then you become friends. Never at any point do you stop and say, we are now covenanting with one another.
Yeah.
So what does that mean that they covenanted with one another? Did they go through some kind of ritual? Is this different from any other type of friendship?
Yeah, we'll see that actually they go through covenants again and again, but or more than once, I should say. There is a ceremonial aspect to it,
Hmm.
but when I was a kid, people used to be like blood brothers.
Oh, yeah. There's a movie with blood brothers.
Oh yeah.
I
That
can't say
you
the
would
name
like
here.
cut your hand and then the other person will cut their hand and you mix blood. I mean,
Yeah.
people don't do that now because of anyway. There is that ceremonial aspect to it, but I think people. So for interestingly enough, for this sermon, we had more than the usual amount of questions. Every sermon, there are people with a lot of good questions
Yeah.
that want like not just clarification, but more of a comment like, "Oh, this is good. How can I do it?" That kind of
Mhm.
questioning. There were a lot of questions for this particular sermon, and I think there's a reason why. I think perhaps there is a really deep desire to understand what a true friendship is,
Yeah.
and I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing. Yeah, and learning from David and Jonathan is a good biblical example we can go through.
So I guess just going into this idea of a covenant, I know for our children's ministry or even for our youth, we always talk about covenant being a deep promise with consequences. How would you kind of define covenant? And even within the context of friendship, how would you talk about covenant?
Well, I mean, I talked about covenant a lot during the sermon,
Yep.
which everyone apparently listened to in the 10 seconds of elevator music that was out there. But there is that level of commitment
Yeah.
that we scarcely see these days. And I think to understand what friends are, um, going down to that basic is kind of sad, but it's necessary. So I think we are in a generation that doesn't know what commitment and friendship is because you could always find new friends and then you could just say, I commit to them then, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But going through thick and thin with people, uh, some people didn't have a choice, right? And finding that one person that you can be best friends with,
Mm.
these kinds of concepts escape people now. What do you mean, best friend? What is that?
Yeah.
You mean your lover, right? That kind of thing. But people can't separate sexual, intimate relationships with deep, true friendships. That's why even when two men are close, we call them like bromances, right? Because we can't separate the two between actual romance and with two brothers that are intimate
Yeah.
without the sex, right?
Mm.
And so we say things like bromance, but that's not what it is. They're not gay, right? And so we are confusing a lot of these concepts together. And I think it does have a lot to do with mixing sex with everything, mixing pleasure as our highest good. And it has a lot to do with commitment phobia or this idea that commitment is not necessary in relationships. And these are all false. They're all false. And we need to speak out against it, right? Pleasure is not the highest good. Um, Commitment is absolutely necessary in any
Yeah.
kind of relationship. And so we should continue to teach what the Bible shows us and teaches us.
So I think one thing that I was wondering, and we actually received a question based on this as well, is applying this idea of covenant in life today. How do we can we make a friendship covenant? Is this a thing that we do today?
I think all the things that we do today should reflect biblical values, which are true. We're not saying biblical values, these are lofty ideas that are unattainable. We're saying these are biblical values that have been shown to us so that we could do it. Maybe we don't have to literally say it like I'm gonna covenant with you.
Right,
That's
right.
weird. But if you have a friendship with someone, you should be committed. You should be self-sacrificing,
Mm.
right? You should be the things that we talked about what a covenant is, dependable, faithful, and selfless. And so, do you exercise and do you kind of show any of these qualities in any of your relationships? If the answer is no, then perhaps that's something that you need to pray about and work on. And maybe that's why you don't have any friends because you're not dependable, you're not faithful, and you're not selfless. Every time you think you have a friend, it's mostly you wanting something from them,
Right,
which
right.
goes back to the any kind of relationship or any kind of connection with a thing or a person is about my pleasure, which is something that we want to continue to fight against. It's not about your pleasure. It's about committing. It's about fulfilling your promises. And I did say that, I believe, in the sermon at one point.
So if I can kind of understand what you're saying, the friendships that we have today, especially within the church, they are covenantal relationships. It's not that, we don't have to go through an actual ritual of making a covenant. You don't say to one another, I'm going to covenant with you in friendship. But as a part of the church, we are covenanting with one another. And as a matter of fact, I think we do have that in our membership covenant.
Yeah. So we say covenant because we want to, show the extreme seriousness of our relationship to one another and how
Yeah.
we're going to hold each other accountable. We're going to hold each other in love. We're going to pray for one another. We're going to lift up the prayers of the other person for each other. So we do take it seriously. So we have something formally called the CGS covenant between members.
Yeah.
And like I said, maybe you want to be, you know, formal, ceremonial, or maybe you think that's cheesy. I think that's beside the point. I think the point is, do you have a relationship that you are dependable in, that you are faithful in, that you are selfless in? And if not, then I think that's the problem, that you don't have any relationships like that. And then if you look at your relationships, do you see yourself as someone that is dependable, faithful, and selfless? If not, then maybe that's the problem. And church covenants actually help us, right? We start to pray for one another. There's a discipline involved, there's a commitment involved, and there's consistency involved because we are consistently saying this covenant, right? And so the discipline, commitment, consistency, they're all necessary for a long lasting, edifying relationship.
Are there any other covenants of friendship in the Bible that we see?
Well, the whole idea of covenant is where we see God covenanting with us
Yeah.
and God showing us through the covenant what he will do for us as his people, which is insane, which is great. You know, God can do whatever he wants, he doesn't need to reveal it to us. But through the covenant exercised and through the covenant ceremonies that we also see, you know, in Genesis with Abraham with the, you know, smoking pot, right?
Yep.
The actual language is with Abraham, there was a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch that passed between the pieces of the carcass
Right.
that
Right.
Abraham prepared, right?
Hmm.
At the time, Abram, and God covenanted with Abram. The reason why this one is so, for me, so amazing is because Abram did not go through the carcasses, which
Right.
in a covenant you would do. So
Hmm.
normally, when you covenant with someone, they should covenant back to you. You don't just covenant one way. So it's not like you're dependable, faithful, and selfless just to one person, and that person doesn't have any idea of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
That's called being a stalker, and this is not what we endorse.
Mm.
But it should be reciprocated, and when you have that reciprocated, it's a truly beautiful thing. But what God does in Genesis 15 is because he knows that we cannot reciprocate it even though it's necessary, even though we want to. So he's the one that does it. Amazingly enough, it's in Genesis 15 where this story comes out about the smoking fire pot and the flaming torch. And it's in John 15 where Jesus talks about where he calls us friend.
Uh-huh.
And in John 15:15,
John 15:15 reads, "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you."
so he calls people use this to sing songs about how Jesus is like my best friend. I
Oh,
hate
yeah.
those songs. Like I think they're really terrible theologically and musically they're really bad and they're so cheesy calling Jesus your best friend. That's not what he means. So when you look at John 15:15 and you look at the context, it's about obeying God. And as you obey God, Jesus is telling his disciples, in your obedience to me, what I am showing you now is I'm going to show you how I consider you a friend by not keeping things from you. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, which is exactly what God did in the covenant with Abraham in Genesis 15 as well. But this is even more so in a deeper level, in a, well, we can say that Genesis 15 pointed to John 15. How about that in terms of friendship and revelation
Yeah.
about how Jesus would not keep things from his friends. So in that sense, he is disclosing information.
Mhm.
Masters have no need to disclose any information to their slaves. You tell a slave to do something, they do it. You tell a servant to get you something, they do it. You don't have, the servant has no right to be like, well, why do you want me to fetch you a pail of water? You know, something like that.
Right, right.
Um, a servant just gets it, right? But Jesus is saying, I call you my friends because I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to show you what I am doing. And God shows us in his word and through Jesus Christ what he wants from us, but what he has done for us, what he will do for us, all these amazing things, which to me is just so awesome. And so that being said, I think that is the model for friendship, that we see that this intimate relationship through, the practice of being, selfless, faithful, and what's the other one again?
Dependable.
Dependable, right? Through those practices, what we do is we kind of exemplify God's characteristics in our relationships. This is why I do not like, and I really think the friendships of today are not only shallow, but they are harmful because they continue to promote this idea that my friends are there to give me pleasure. And the thing, well, recent days, what I rail against the most are bachelorette parties. Pause for dramatic effect. I hate bachelorette parties. I think they're stupid. I'll tell it to any woman in our church because I think bachelor parties are stupid. And bachelorette parties are only in existence because of bachelor parties. Well, let's go to the history of bachelor
Yeah,
parties.
please.
So people started to get back to do bachelor parties, not because, oh, these are friends, let's hang together. It's because one of the men in the friendship group, they're going to get married. And when you get married, what you do is you commit to this other person.
Yeah.
So in a sense, there's a sense of mourning, there's a sense of separation. This person won't be here anymore. But bachelor parties in our secular age has taken a much graver turn than just what I said. They no longer can be promiscuous. That's why you have bachelor parties. That's why in movies and these kinds of, media outlets, whatever you see on TV or TikTok or what in Hollywood, bachelor parties is where you become one last time as promiscuous and as sexually irresponsible as
Right.
possible.
Right.
That is not a Christian ideal. Bachelor parties in today's secular age, as it defines it, is evil. It is not Christian. Bachelorette parties are there because women were like, why can't we have parties because you have a party? Women aren't losing friends. That's not how our culture works. It never has been. But because of this whole idea that men and women have to be equal in every way, we started to get something called bachelorette parties. So, bachelor parties are stupid. Bachelorette parties are stupid on stupid. And so these are things that I do not like. So this is a cultural thing that we have to do. So if someone does not have a bachelorette party or a bachelor party, they feel like they've missed out in life.
Yep. Yep.
Let me just tell you, you have not missed out on anything. You doing your promiscuous thing is nothing. Now, people in our church when they do bachelor or bachelor parties, obviously, they keep it civil. There's no promiscuity in it, right? But what we should understand still is where the root is from, where it stems from, where it's come from. And so, knowing that, are you going to toe the line? Are you going to go as far as you can, minus the sexual promiscuity? And I think that's what some people might do. So, for example, I'm going to go to a bachelor party, but I go to this church. So I don't want to do anything that is sinful. So let me just go up to what I can, whatever their idea is. I'll drink until I don't get drunk. I'll dance, but it won't be unfaithfully to, my bride or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that your idea of a bachelor party? And I think that's also stupid because there's no goal. What's the goal of the bachelor party? Is it to grow deeper in your covenant with your brothers? And I don't think anybody thinks like that, Is this just to have fun? Perhaps,
Right.
right? I think it's an excuse for people to just have fun. But the whole premise of a bachelor party is one last time we get to do this, which is kind of stupid. Because if
Mhm.
you're just having fun with a bunch of brothers, that's not one last time. You could have it any other time after you get married. I bet you can do it at least once a year. I bet you.
Mhm.
If you really put your mind to it, you can have a, quote unquote, anything you do with a bachelor party, you could do in this men's gathering. We'll call it, let's say, gravitas.
So I'm wondering, so understanding the premise of what a bachelor party was supposed to be in the first place, understanding how the secular world has turned it into this last chance for promiscuity. I'm wondering, as Christians, and you said this before too, guys can sometimes just go to hang out or to, go away together. But I think oftentimes, at least today, at least in the circles that I am a part of or people that I know, they use the bachelor party as an opportunity for them to go away together. Whereas, they would take days off and go away together to celebrate this brother that's getting married. And there's no promiscuity involved. There's no activity like that or promoting that. So I'm wondering, would that also be wrong?
Now that I've said what I said, I'd like to say that I love the bachelor party that my friends threw for me. So when I got married, what they did was they got an Airbnb right by the lake. There was a canoe, and they took me to a shooting range, which I've never been to before.
How'd you
And
shoot?
I've never been to a shooting range. I've never shot a gun before. I grew up in New York. There's, um, you know, it's hard to get a gun or a firearm. And so, unless you're part of a gang, I don't see why anybody would have a gun in New York City. So, in a place like that, which would be an illegal firearm, but legally, it's pretty hard to obtain any kind of firearm in New York. But I mean, they took me there, and I had a blast. I
Yeah.
had a blast. But isn't that my point? Isn't that kind of sad? The one time we get to really hang out with friends in a meaningful manner, where we get to enjoy each other's company, is at a bachelor party when someone gets married,
Right, right.
right? It has no tie with me getting married. It could be, and I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, or I'm just trying to be, as gracious as possible. It could be that in a bachelor party, you could dote on the groom by gifting him
Uh-huh.
with like this trip.
Right.
And that could be one of the reasons why you do one.
Yeah.
But that's not what it was for.
Right.
And there's no reason why we can't have something like the bachelor party you had or I had any other time of the year. It doesn't
Yeah.
it, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be tied with someone getting married is the
Right.
point.
Right.
But it could be something celebratory, it could be something congratulatory. And I think that's the point. We want to congratulate you by taking you on this trip,
Mhm.
and that's fine. Just the dudes, just the close dudes. But
Right.
my concern is the origins and what it can never untie itself from. It's just dudes that go out, and it's just guys that will, you know, if it's Gen Zers, perhaps, or even millennials or Gen Xers, it could be that still you still get drunk.
Mm,
You drink to get drunk,
mm.
and it's like a one last hurrah. That's still a sin. And you're promoting sin then if you get drunk at a bachelor party. It is. It's not like, oh, because it's a bachelor party, it's okay. Then what's the difference between you getting drunk and you doing some other sin? And then you'll start to compromise your ideals and
Yeah.
the things that you believe are core to your Christian identity, by doing those things just because it's a quote unquote bachelor party. So bachelor party has this connotation where it's like a one last hurrah, let me do one thing that is questionable, some things like that. And before I became a pastor, I was young. I mean, I went to things that were questionable, and then I just you know my friends know this, but when we went to bachelor parties, we had a lot of money to spend. We would travel, and we would go to these exotic places, but in these exotic places there would be like questionable places. And they know me as the dude that just waited outside while they went inside. Um, but even just going with them, things like that. What am I gonna tell them? This is wrong. That they shouldn't do this. But if you knew someone was gonna sin, what do you just stand by? Are you complicit in that sense? It's a very difficult situation. It doesn't matter if you didn't go inside the strip club, even if you stood outside. So that weighs on my conscience too. even if you stood outside, you didn't do anything to stop someone from sinning and damaging their own body. Just like, what does Paul say in First Corinthians? How, when you sin, a sexual sin is a sin against your own body, right?
Mm.
And so, even when they're damaging their own body, you're not going to say anything, that this is going to stay with them. It doesn't matter if it's before their marriage, it's going to stay with them forever. You're not going to forget this. And so, how about that kind of warning? That's not there. So, I'm not saying that I'm this awesome Christian that was able to stay pure. Um, I'm like, there are things that still weigh on my heart and conscience as well. So I don't like this whole idea of a bachelor party. And again, bachelorette party is stupid on top of stupid, because the whole premise is this is a one last hurrah kind of thing. I get it. In our church, it's different. A
Right.
lot of people go to these places, parties, gatherings to celebrate and say, we want to gift this to you. But I would warn people, be careful, because there is drinking involved.
Mm.
There could be mistakes, and you can ruin your life in that manner right before. And then there's that whole stupid saying like, what happens in Vegas stays in
Stays
Vegas, or
there. Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But it
the
doesn't.
latest one that I've heard is what happens in Niagara stays in Niagara. No,
I
you
don't
haven't
think
heard
that's
that one?
recent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's from The Office.
Yeah. But look, if you have to say it, then it's no good. If you know, you know.
So, if I were to summarize our conversation about bachelor and bachelorette parties, because this is a hot take and I adore hot takes, you believe that because of the premise of what a bachelor party was supposed to be and how secular it is and how it promotes promiscuity, that in its origin, this is an evil thing. Um, However, I'm wondering if, like you said before, we are taking this trip to appreciate or to dote on our brother or sister by gifting them this trip, because oftentimes the future bride or the future groom does not pay for the trip. So to gift them this trip and hang out together, you're saying that even if we were to do that, we were to be careful, because oftentimes, because of what the bachelor party and bachelorette party is supposed to stand for, it may give license to sin. And should it give license to even budge or compromise even a little bit, then that is an evil thing.
And that's me being gracious, because it's so one sided that it's ridiculously one sided. All the energy and effort, money, resources that we put into these bachelorette parties,
Right.
that are we building them up for their marriage together? I
Mm.
really like the communities. So I've read certain church communities, before a couple gets married, a bunch of the married people invite them over and they have dinner
Oh,
and they have
wow.
a getaway, they have outings together.
Wow.
Yeah, even let's say camping, for instance,
Mm.
two separate cabins, obviously, but
Right.
the married couples would, share wisdom, insight, and how to start. Do we have anything like that in our culture?
Mm.
I think the answer is no,
Mm.
because that's not the focus. The focus is you're single, you got to live it up. So,
Right,
yeah,
right, right.
even if we're saying, let's celebrate and gift, that's being gracious. And I think the whole premise of a bachelor party is stupid. And again, bachelor party is, you know,
Worse.
exponentially stupid.
So can you just explain that? I think some people may be confused, because I guess the way that we understand it is guys have a bachelor party and girls have a bachelorette party. So why is the bachelorette party that much worse?
I explained it, right,
Yeah.
Jensen?
But I just wanted to make sure that people because then I don't want people to just be like,
I mean, I mentioned it, but
yeah,
I'll
okay.
mention it again. Like, bachelorette parties are there because of bachelor parties.
Mm.
And so, it's about, let's equally be stupid, which is dumb. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you're saying is, and because also you had mentioned previously, like, oh, as if girls are going to lose friends, that never happens, right? So are you saying that there's a difference between guys and girls in
Yeah.
that
So,
sense?
guys, culturally speaking,
Yeah.
guys believe that they lose friends once they get married.
Uh-huh.
Culturally speaking, this is still true today, by the
Mm-hmm.
way. There's a saying that I believe holds mostly true. This is not universally true or absolutely true. Mostly true is that when you become married, you have other married couples as friends.
Yeah.
You don't just hang out alone most of the time. Most of the time, you hang out with married couples. And the way that happens is your wife needs to like their wife. So
Uh-huh.
I share this sometimes in our counseling sessions, and my counseling sessions, that in a couple, in our culture, if the wife doesn't like the other couple's wife, then you guys are not hanging out as a couple. That's just the way it is.
Right.
It doesn't work. The reverse doesn't work. If the dudes don't like each other, they can still hang out, is the point.
Yeah.
And that has happened in our church. That does happen still today. Dudes might not particularly like each other, but because the wives like each other, the whole families hang out.
Uh-huh.
Things of that nature.
Hmm.
It just happens. It's just the way it is. So it doesn't work the same way. The fact that we're trying to equate it just shows, and that I have to explain it, just shows how much we think we have to tippy toe when we talk about the differences between men and women.
Hmm.
Um, and the fact that maybe perhaps that we don't hear in this podcast could be upsetting to some people. But yeah, men and women are different, not only culturally, but emotionally, the way they read, interpret information, data, the way they experience things are completely different from men. Maybe not completely, but they are different.
Yeah.
And it exercises itself. It actually plays out differently in the lives of people. And so bachelorette parties are made because they wanted to be equal to bachelor parties, which was again stupid. So to have a bachelorette party just because bachelors have a party is just
Mm.
stupid.
Mm.
And I know of men that say, now that you're married, we never hang out anymore.
Mm.
There's a lot more cases than women go, now that you're married, we don't hang out anymore. That, in fact,
Right.
even anecdotally, I know of zero cases like that. If girls like each other, they just hang out. If guys like each other and the wife doesn't like the guy, you guys are probably not going to hang out. Um, and so those are very basic cultural expressions that we are experiencing today that I have to spell out because we are so um, depraved.
Mm.
I don't know what else to say. I have to spell this stuff out because this is an obvious observation anybody can make, but either want to refute the obvious and you want to deny it, saying "What I'm not like that" or something to
Right.
that effect because you're so special. And so because you're so special, there is no generality that we can, say across the board to help society understand what expression is. That's exactly what we're going through, right? Because of this one instance, one exception, one standout, we should get rid of every stereotype there is. And the word stereotype is even bad.
Mm.
The word stereotype isn't bad. The word stereotype is exactly what it is. If you see a guy coming in with a gun to your store with a black hoodie on, you go, that guy looks pretty dangerous. That's a stereotype. It's a good stereotype because, in all likelihood, he came for nefarious reasons. He didn't come to buy, a piece of
Chocolate.
Kit Kat or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I just happen to have a gun in my hand and have a black hoodie over my head. That's not what happens.
Hmm.
And so it's good to have stereotypes. It's good for survival. It's good for assessment.
Yeah.
But we live in a society where any kind of stereotype is looked down on because we have become so depraved.
Thank you for that hot take. That was nice. I did not think we would be talking about that today. However, that was very, very
It's
nice.
always a twist here
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Dear Church podcast.
It's very exciting. I guess just quickly going back to friendship and covenant, I did have one more question. I think before you were talking about,
Well, I mean, maybe you can help me answer this.
uh,
So you should help me answer this. If bachelor parties and bachelor parties are so stupid or so bad, or
yeah,
they have such potential for evil, what can we share with our church members? Is there any message of, let's say, encouragement or even hope? Because when people get married, this is something that they look forward to. This is part of our culture.
right.
So what should we do? Like, I know Jansuki's here, and once he has a bachelor party, he's like, "Oh no, I can't have a bachelor party anymore. I'm very sad." Right? Wait, what did you do for yours? Did you go lifting?
No, we went to Denver. We went hiking.
Yeah.
And then what else did we do? Yeah, we ate at restaurants. That's really all we did. Actually, there's no reason to actually go to Denver to do those things, though. We could have gone to the Poconos for that, actually.
Yeah. So how would you respond to someone that asks you after hearing this? It's like, wait, I was kind of looking forward to my bachelor or bachelorette party. What should I do or what can I do? Is there any encouragement or hope?
I think, if someone were to ask me that, and this is just, I guess, my personal
Personal hot take.
take. No, no, it's not hot. It's just very lukewarm. Um, I think, what you said helps us to reflect on what this bachelor party was created for. And I think just reflecting on that, I think we are able to make decisions that are wiser. And I know that's a very general thing to say, but I don't I don't think you were saying the idea of a trip in itself is bad. Um, but I think understanding the dangers, understanding I guess the origin of it, I think you have to be extra cautious and proactive in making sure that it is a celebratory thing that encourages your brother. Um, and yeah, I think that's how I would think about it. I don't think you're saying people shouldn't go on trips, period.
If you don't do a bachelor or bachelor party, you're not missing out on anything.
Yeah.
In fact, one of our listeners, who's actually an elder, if he didn't go to one bachelor party, he wouldn't have Lyme disease. So, in fact, you could have gained by not going to a bachelor party. But, all joking aside, there's nothing that you lose if you don't go. If you must go, and this is something that your friends want to do for you, then just keep those things in mind. I would
Yeah.
say be wary of the dangers, which are far greater
Mm,
than the benefits for this trip. And so be careful, be wise. Um, you're still a Christian, even though you go on a bachelor party. What happens in Vegas, God knows.
definitely comes back.
Yeah. And it will, and if you sin against your body,
Oh yeah.
that's something that your body will have to bear for the rest of your life. And so those are things that we want to warn people and share with people because we care about you guys.
Right.
And if you really want to hang out with friends and you want to grow deeper in relationship with them, well, listen to the rest of this episode.
Or pick up golf.
Or pick up golf.
Yeah.
Sure.
Um, thank you for that, Pastor Gene. Just quickly going back to friendship. And I think this all does connect, right? I think it all connects. If you are truly a friend and you are faithful, dependable, and selfless, then you wouldn't make your friend go to these things. You would make sure that he or she is on the path of holiness. And so I think it does connect. I'm just wondering, thinking about a covenant, you brought up a great point of how God's covenant with us is our source, is our reasoning, is our source for the covenants that we have, and that covenant is a gift that we can exercise with one another. I'm wondering, what if, we're reflecting on ourselves and we aren't dependable and we aren't faithful or we aren't selfless? How do we work on these different things? How should we start?
Yeah, that's great. I think there was a desire for David and Jonathan to covenant with one another first. It wasn't like forced upon them. And one thing that we see here, I believe, is that Jonathan is the one that covenanted with David. So Jonathan initiated, he saw what David did and he knew that God was with him. And so, understanding that God was with David, Jonathan wanted to be as close to David as possible, wanted to be friends with him, wanted to have someone always close by. And that's exactly what it says, I believe, in Proverbs 17:17, right?
Proverbs 17:17 reads, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity."
Yeah. So, I think we really want someone to love at all times, someone that is there for us, someone that we can express our love and have love expressed to us at all times. And that's what a friend is or should be. And who would you want that with? Wouldn't you want that with someone that God is with?
Mm,
And I believe Jonathan Jonathan is like the hero so far as we've read in First Samuel
Yeah.
up to this
Yeah.
point. Jonathan is truly a man of God who understands what is good and what is beautiful. He's a wise person already. And so Jonathan covenants with David. And he knows that he has the upper hand, that he is the greater in the relationship. And yet he still wants to have a relationship. Why? Because God. And I think that's the first thing. If you want to be dependable, you want to, be selfless, you want to continue to, be faithful, and you want to exercise it to someone, then wouldn't you want to do that with someone who is godly, someone who God is with, not just any person? And so I think that's the first thing. Are you, drawn to somebody that is like that, or are you drawn to something else? Like we go back to the whole like bachelor party. People will listen to this like, people are gonna have it anyway. Why?
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask why. Because FOMO, 100%. Because other people have done it. It's like, well, all my friends have done it. Why can't I do it? I feel like I'm gonna miss out. In the same way, like, well, yeah, you want a godly person as your friend, so why wouldn't you? Because I don't know. There's more exciting things out there. I don't know. Whatever the case is, but obviously, it's going to lead to heartache, heartbreak, pain, and perhaps even sin. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to covenant with anybody that is not godly. So I would say someone who you are drawn to should be someone that is godly, and that shows it just shows your level of wisdom and sanctification. Um, then developing these characteristics. Now that I've said that, developing these characteristics, and I mentioned it really quickly, it takes practice. So it takes not just commitment, it takes consistency and discipline. Um, Discipline is something that you develop in friends with friendship, right? And so you're not always going to want to do the things that your friends want to do, unless it's some kind of social media group. They're not really friends then. You only do what you want to do because you're in the. What are you in, Sam? You're in that social media group. It used to be a Facebook group.
Which one?
Now you guys are Comic-Con, was it? You
No.
don't you dress up as Thor or something like that?
No.
And then you go and you just go I from Midgard.
LigCon. LigCon.
Ligcon.
Yeah, that's where I go.
Yeah. And so like those kinds of so-called friendships are just really affinity relationships. That's not what a friendship is. And so you want someone that is more than just, one point of connection. And so some people have this really deep point of connection because, of this affinity. So it could be something that I guess I joked about, but something like dressing up as Thor in Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of you guys get together in Hackensack and you guys dress up as Thor, you throw hammers. I don't know, I don't know, whatever you guys do.
Yeah. It's a good time.
Yeah.
You said FOMO before, but just for the people that may not know what that means, it's fear of missing out. Yeah. No, just because, and also, quick question. If our office was the Avengers, who would be who? And you can't say Christine would be Scarlet. No, what's her name? Scarlett Johansson, because it's just not based on gender, but who would be who?
Shinzo would be
Would not be Nick Fury.
Thor.
Wow, handsome. Christopher Hemsworth, okay? Who would Brian be? He'd probably be the tree.
Brian would be Captain America.
What would Pastor Paul be?
Pastor Paul would probably be Spider-Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, what would Christine be?
Christine would be, I guess she would have to be Black Widow.
No, but not because of gender. You know what I mean? Do you really think she'd be Black Widow?
Probably the assassin, the silent killer.
I feel like she's not really the killer type.
Ask who you would be.
No, I'm not. That's actually who I was going to skip. I'm not going to ask.
Ant-Man.
Who? Anyway, speaking of friendship, what if, these qualities that we talked about, dependability, faithfulness, selflessness, What if we don't see these qualities in the friend? What do we do? How do we
Well, that's the
approach them?
covenant. Yeah, that's a great question. But that's what the covenant is there for.
Mhm.
Someone who has promised to commit to you. And I think that's what you develop. So dependability,
Right.
faithfulness, selflessness, those things are developed. You're not at 100 right away. You can, but you have to have something, right? You're not at like negative, but
Yeah.
maybe you start out at 15, but then as you continue to, develop in your friendship, as you grow and mature as a person individually, those levels just go up. That's what discipline is there for. In any kind of discipline, you need to stay committed. You need to stay consistent.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that people give up way too easily. And it could be through hurts, through pain, through even betrayal. It could be. But one thing you don't do is you don't betray each other.
Mm.
And so you're always committed to one another. And that's what we see with Jonathan and David.
Mm.
But we see ultimately in God, God never gives up on his people.
Mm.
And even though the people are terrible, so he definitely is an example that is on the extreme side, right?
Mm.
And so even though we are sinners, we fall again and again. And if you read the Old Testament, people are like, "Oh, these Israelites are always failing again and again." And this is absolutely true, but we see God is faithful over and over again. In fact, Chesed is translated as steadfast love. So he
Yeah.
loves his people steadfastly. So he is the primary example. He is the one that we are to imitate. But it doesn't mean we should be slackers. We
Right.
should get
Right.
up to
Right.
the place where we could also say to those that we are mentoring or
Mm.
leading or serving or even friends with, 1 Corinthians 11:1, where Paul says, "Be imitators of me as I imitate Christ."
I think these are great questions that we can ask. Are we dependable? Are we faithful? Are we selfless?
Yeah, I think it's a good approach because perhaps we would be tempted to ask this of other people before we ask this of
Right.
ourselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Eugene, for that. And again, I know that this is a thing that perhaps goes against the grain of culture. And so if you have any questions, please email us at podcast@cgsnj.org.
But isn't it great that there is an out against the grain of culture? Where's culture going?
Right.
Only shallow friendships, friendships
Mm.
that do not last,
Mm.
only relationships that have some kind of sexual aspect to it, something that can only we can derive pleasure from.
Right.
These are not friendships, and that's why people are so depressed. People feel so unfulfilled, and people are more angry and emotional. So, yeah, get yourself a good godly friend.
Yeah.
Use biblical principles and pray about it. And I think one of the questions, if you're going to move on to the next topic, I just want to finish off with this. If people are listening to this and saying, all right, and they're going to ask, how do I pick that one person that I'm friends with?
Hmm.
How do I do this? Do I just be dependable, faithful, and selfless to anybody, or just any godly person? Yeah, and then you might run into issues and you might run into some difficulties there. But this is why I want to encourage all our listeners to join a church. Church is where we first covenant to each other, and then from there we can grow in deeper relationship. Church is where we understand and learn about Christ's friendship toward us, his covenant that he keeps toward us, and that we can continue to have someone to exercise it with. So go to a church, covenant yourself with the church, become a member there. Don't just attend, don't just leave right after service, and continue to, uh, I don't know, just continue to get plugged in and plow through, and then you'll see fruit grow out of that.
Thank you for that. Moving on to our next topic of conversation. There was a post, I believe an article written by, or actually written through TGC. And this was posted on August 5th. And I wanted to just read an excerpt that was on their Instagram. It reads, "Every culture and nation must find common consent in public ethics, specifically on what is prohibited, permitted, and promoted for the common good. True toleration must include living peaceably with deep differences. Most Western nations have extended marital status to arrangements other than heterosexual monogamy. The wise Christian will affirm the legal right of consenting adults to order their lives without fear. Yet that right doesn't entail affirming the goodness of these arrangements. Believers can be good neighbors to all while diverging on some moral issues. This was posted on their Instagram, and there was a lot of backlash with the phrase, the wise Christian will affirm the legal right of consenting adults to order their lives without fear. A lot of people took that to mean that the wise Christian will affirm the legal right of two homosexual people to marry, therefore affirming homosexual marriage. I think perhaps just kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps it's the language, the unclarity. Is that a word? Disclarity, declarity, not clearness, unclearness. Perhaps it's the fogginess of the language, but I mean, how are Christians supposed to think about this? Are we supposed to not acknowledge those in a non-biblical marriage? Do we acknowledge those in a non-biblical marriage?
It's true that some Christians might be reading into it and they can come back. Well, I mean, TGC can come back and say this is not what it meant, or we meant by this, or the author meant by it. But looking at it in context, it's hard because right before it's talking about marital status, and then the wise Christian will affirm the legal right of consenting adults to order their lives without fear.
Yeah.
We could take it multiple ways. It doesn't seem that they're then talking about, um, persecution against homosexuals. It doesn't seem like that's what they're referring to. So, what is this fear that they are referring to? And so, I guess maybe the author had that in mind when they were writing without fear, or it could mean what maybe the critics are thinking, that ordering their lives without fear just meant that their fear of not being able to get married, not being able to get marital status or the benefits of marriage.
Mm.
And then the critics would then be right. So I think it's a little confusing, like you said. I would say the words, the wise Christian will affirm the legal right of consenting adults to order their lives without fear, is unwise and unclear, like you said. And because it's unclear, I would probably expect a clarifying statement. If they don't, then they don't care. I don't expect too much from TGC these days anyway, so it's not a big thing. But as far as Christians are concerned, I would think that the wise Christian would never affirm a legal right for homosexuals to get married,
Mm.
because marriage is not between a man and a man.
Right.
You don't have a legal right for homosexuals to get married. So I'm sure TGC should see this. I mean, this is what they've said until, 5 minutes ago. So unless they're changing their position, um, if they're changing their position, then that's something to be alarmed about. But yeah, we do not affirm gay marriage because that is not a thing. It's That's not the definition of marriage. Marriage is a gift by God given to mankind, where a man and a woman get together and there is fruit that is birthed, not just babies, but a lot more. But yeah, especially babies, that God has gifted mankind with his common grace.
So I'm wondering, um, I think just going down this line of thinking, then we don't acknowledge or affirm the right for homosexuals to marry. However, let's say that they are married, because right now there are a lot of states where homosexuals are able to get married. Is it a federal law? So right now it's a federal law that homosexuals are able to get married. Let's just say that your friends are in a homosexual marriage. Do you acknowledge that? Do you not acknowledge that? And I guess carrying on from that too, if we are not to acknowledge non-biblical marriages, do we acknowledge a marriage between a believer and a non-believer? Because we know that that is prohibited in scripture as well.
Well, there are people that were married, and then one becomes a believer, and then Paul talks about how The whole family's holy because of it in
Right.
First Corinthians. There's all these other things. And if you're a Christian that wants to get married to a seeker versus a clear heretic versus someone that is a pagan, those are all things that I believe the church must have discernment
Mhm.
in its exercise of discipline. Okay, I wouldn't treat them all the same, obviously, but
Yeah.
they are all serious things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they're not serious, but they're all serious things, but they would be treated differently. I think your question has to do with how do we address people who are in a homosexual relationship
Mhm.
and is now legally, um, according to the secular state, married, right?
Right.
To give TGC the benefit of the doubt, maybe they're talking about secular legal status has nothing to do with us. To that, I would also, and that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. To that, I would also disagree. What's up is up, what's left is left, what's down is down, what's right is right. And that's the point. Just because it's right for us and it's not right for you doesn't mean we let you do that. It's just right. And we share that with the world. This is what is good. This is what is noble. This is what is right. We want to share this with you so that we can enjoy what God has for us together. It's out of love that we share the truth. And people will not accept it. And that's a fact. People won't accept it. And so if they won't accept it, they refuse to accept it, what do? You leave them alone. That's one thing. You continue to preach the good news to them. That's another. But do you take a knife and slash their tires? I don't know.
Right.
Whatever it
Right.
is, the answer is no. You don't do that to people. You don't subjugate them to any kind of harm or property damage. You don't do that.
Mm.
And so there are things that we do and we don't do. But do we just simply accept it and move on? I think that's a hard one for me to say yes. Why would you ever accept it if that's someone that you care about or if it's someone that God has placed into your circle? And so I wouldn't accept it. I would have, and so I was listening to this one person who has a son who is gay, and he personally believes it's wrong. But his son, who is gay, uh, recently got married, and um, he wasn't against it because what is he not going to be happy for the rest of his life? And that's how he kind of thought about it. I think it's a very difficult position if someone that you care about deeply believes that this is the only way that they could be happy. So he said he wasn't going to get it, but he also is in line with the whole thing where happiness is equated with pleasure. And that's where I would probably have pushed back against. Well, obviously, I don't have a son who's gay who wants to get married to another dude, so I don't know exactly how that feels. And while this is anecdotal, I do believe that this can resonate with a lot of people. What do you do with someone that you really sincerely care about who is going down this path or already has gone down this path? And how do you address those people? Again, I would say you continue to address them in truth, and that is love. You do it in a loving manner because that is truthful, right? And so those are the things that we are continually doing. This is the Christian witness by us living rightly and proclaiming what is truth. And so I think we should continue to do that. I don't think we should just, lock our doors and just stay home when our neighbors are in trouble. And this obviously is going to lead into trouble, or it already has.
So I'm trying to think practically. Um, we may have listeners that are friends with gay couples, married or not married. We also have people. We also may have friends that are living together before marriage, that are heterosexual. I'm wondering, being a good friend, like we talked about, how do we approach this as a witness? And I think especially with the gay marriage, how do you approach this situation? What is your end goal here? I think the end goal is to for them to repent and turn to Christ, but that would even mean getting a legal divorce. And so what is our goal here and how do we go about doing this?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to answer generally, then it'd probably be um, the most powerful thing that you could do is continue to point this person or these persons to Christ. And so continue to point them to Christ, continue to share the word of God with them. I think something that perhaps someone more conservative like yourself could get hung up on, not you, I'm saying, but someone
Ah,
like you
yeah.
could get hung up on is you just are really so hung up on one particular sin that you don't address the whole person.
Uh-huh.
And so that even though this person identifies themselves with the sin, you also affirm that by identifying him or her with that sin. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying you do it. I'm saying that that's a temptation that could happen when you address people or counsel people or when you have friendships with people
I
that
see.
go through this.
I see.
So yeah, address the whole person. The whole person without Christ isn't sin. And if they are a professing Christian and they're giving into this sin, then continue to point them to Christ, which would obviously lead them to repentance and
Mm,
showing them that without repentance you can't go back to Christ. But I would say showing the beauty of Christ, his creative order, his creation order, his commandments, how we are people now that are supposed to do his commandments. Because again, the Great Commission has that element that we are not to miss, that we also, not just as we make disciples, we baptize them, and then we also teach them to obey everything Jesus has commanded us. And Jesus has commanded us everything that is in the Bible.
mm.
Whatever's in the Bible, he's commanded us to do. So let's continue to do that and let's continue to share why it's so good, why it's not backwards, why it's not harmful. In fact, it's beneficial.
Mm.
And people that rage against, things like, oh, does that mean you have to have a beard? Some crazy thing like that. Um, those are the people that are most unhappy because you continue to divert away from what is true, what is good, what is beautiful, what is noble.
So proclaim the gospel.
Yeah,
That's a great
yeah.
way to end it. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we talk about solo scriptura. What is that? Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.
Peace.